Hey, Forex Fortune Hunters, Tom Wilmot. Welcome back to our series on how to use Metatrader to crush the currency markets. In this particular video, we have several goals for you. Number one, you should be able to come away with an understanding, a better understanding of how we created the Metatrader template Thailand. That's what you see up in this corner right here. And you can see it's comprised of three different types of indicators. First of all, our multiple moving averages. Second of all, Zeelander signal line that came from our book published in 2015, The Amazing Zeelander Flytrap Forex Trading System. And finally, Trend Magic and how we've integrated that into this particular approach and strategy. So if you're interested in how you can avoid false signals and try to take best advantage of this template in order to keep your equity curve going up and to the right, then hold on to your hat and we'll get started right after this. Okay, as our first deliverable for you in this video, I'd like to just quickly review how the template Thailand was put together, what the indicators are, and what they mean. First of all, we have our trusty, as a matter of fact, I'll get rid of this here so you can see better perhaps. We have our trusty multiple moving averages. This is the 12, 16, 20, and 24. And if we open this up even a little bigger, you can see here what's happening. These are the moving averages. Now, when you get a medallion, a white medallion like this, you can assume that we've had a crossover. And we draw a line, the Zeelander signal line, at the closing value of the candle that created this crossover. So you would get a notification with the medallion, and then you would get the signal line, and the first time you'd be able to act on it would be on the candle following, so in that next 15-minute period. Likewise, over here you can see that we had a downturn in the moving averages. We had an azure-colored medallion that was here, and then the moving averages dropped below that very briefly, but then turned around. And so this would be what we'd call a false signal, and we'll talk a little bit about how to deal with that as we move through this material. One other thing to notice here, for those of you who aren't familiar with Metatrader, this is the start of the new day. So this, for me in Boston, New York, time frame would be the beginning of the Asian session. It begins at approximately 5 o'clock on the East Coast, and then it runs into the evening hours. Okay, so that at 8 or 9 o'clock in Boston, it's about 8 or 9 o'clock in Hong Kong and so forth. So a little bit earlier in Australia and Japan, but no matter, that's the Asian session here. Now, with the pound US, this may or may not be the time frame that would be the strongest mover time frame, and so that's one issue that you may want to keep in mind when you're predicting whether you're going to get a violent move in one direction or another. But that's just one of our opportunities to try to judge what's happening. Let's stop right now and let's see whether our indicator, the Zeelander signal line, as a second one, what could we do to change things around a little bit? Well, let's pull up our indicators list. And I believe the signal line's up here. Yes, Wilmot Signals. And by the way, you can download any of these from our Dropbox.com file page for free. All you have to do is check the link down below this description, send me an email, and be happy to give you an invitation to that download area for no charge and no obligation. But in any event, here's Wilmot Signals. And if we were to edit that one, let's try to bring this up into view. We have a couple of things. First of all, we have an ability to change the crossover time frames. This would be the 12 and 24. That would be the same as our medallion indicator, right? So that when those things changed over, and let's say the indicator the 12 cross down below the 24, as we just saw in that false signal area, that would create a medallion, and the signal line would be placed at the closing value, or the low actually, of that candle that created the crossover opportunity. Now notice that the signal moving average period is made 10. If we were to change this, and you can, if you would like to get to a point, let's say, well, you could even do the 20 EMA. Let's see what happens is one way to avoid signals. And notice that when we do that, and because only the 12 has briefly covered and moved down through this area, you don't get an arrow until you see the what did I say, the 20 moving down through, and it never does, even though you had this crossover. So the next issue is that you can see here when the 20 crosses over, you're still in good shape. So one way that you could conceivably avoid false signals is simply by changing the time frame on the moving average that you have crossing over. So basically the strategy was as follows. If you had a crossover of this sort, typically what you found was there was a pullback into the bands after any crossover occurred, and then a continuation. And what I wanted to do with this indicator was say, okay, now we've had a double confirmation, because we've not only had the crossover, but we've had some continuation of the trend higher. And you can see that this one moved very nicely up. And by changing this to a 20 EMA, you avoided a false signal. So that is a first and a primary way you can avoid false signals. Now, what's the downside? Why did I have it set to 10? Well, in many cases, what you'd like to do, if the 10 or 12 is here, you would like to see something happen and a signal given before you get a runaway price, because you don't want to be buying up here. You'd like to be buying very close to the signal line, in order that you keep your stop loss levels under control and your risk under control, because obviously you'd like to put your stop loss right under the signal line, which would also be below the 24 EMA. That's the area in which you'd like to make sure that you have minimized risk while giving you an opportunity for this kind of upside. So let's take our pointer here, and let's just see if we were to buy in this area now, and we come back here, we have about 9 pips. Now I've changed this up here. We want to see a pullback after the arrow, and in fact it goes higher and then pulls back. But bottom line, you'd like to be within 2 or 3 pips of the signal line, especially if you're trading a shorter time frame. And 10 or 12, you just have to decide, is that what risk I'd like to have? I'm not sure. If you take the pullback, or if you look down in this area here, you'll find that maybe you can get a little bit better entry than 7 or 8 pips away. So that's one consideration that you have. Now, the next way we can maybe minimize our risk and still have the crossover that we'd like. Let's take a quick look now, and we're going to put our arrow here. Let's put our vertical line here. Let's take a look at dropping down, as we suggest in the book, to a 5-minute chart. And what we're going to do now is pull over here. Here's our situation. Notice in this area here, we had a pull back down into the bands and then a firing up higher. Now, what I'd like to do at this point is to just add back in our trend magic line. Okay, so what we're going to do here is go to indicators. Remember I got rid of it so that you'd be able to see more clearly. Custom, and I've got to go way down below your video screen. Sorry about that. I'm just going down through my indicator list to find it. Okay, Trend Magic, here we go. And we've got all of the right colors and so forth. I'm going to change the blue to a white. And then we'll put this on here. And sure enough, here we go. Now, the Trend Magic on the 5 is still absolutely white and moving higher. We haven't had any roll back over of the bands to a negative, so we're looking like we're still steaming to the north. So if you fall below the trend magic, it's not a real problem, but for sure, it'd be better if it popped back up like this. And if you were late to this entry, I'd kind of wait until this was over. And the second way you can take a look at any kind of a chance to avoid false signals is to wait for what I call a candle reversal. And I've put this right here. Watch for a candle reversal confirmation. This candle right here took out the previous two lows. Okay, the previous two closing values. So as a result, that's pretty strong evidence that you could, in fact, now begin to move your stop loss. You don't want to go back down even to this low here. We've created a higher low, and so I put my stop loss in this level. And if we were to enter here, you can see that coming back to here is still only 7, even though the trend is well underway. You're above the signal line. You have good values. Notice that in our MACD colored lines, even though you have this reversal happening, you still have downward pointing histogram bars, the tan orange ones here. And this is a trailing indicator, so in terms of timing. So as a result, you're often going to be able to enter before these turn white again. Okay, so as a result of that, just notice you have the pullback. You have not gone down below the 45 here on our pullback, even though we drop below trend magic. And as soon as we see this reversal, that's a really neat place to kind of enter your trade. Okay, so let's just take a quick break, and we'll come back with 3 or 4 more ideas for you in 1 minute. Okay, I've reset this pound US chart to 15 minutes from the 5 you were looking at before. And in particular, it's the 22nd of February, which was Monday. And it's interesting that in the overnight session, you can see the 19th skipping to the 22nd. Monday night might be also a time you'd want to watch out for. The situation on this 15-minute chart, notice that we had an up arrow and then a collapse. Well, I would also suggest to you want to be very careful, because up here is 23 pips away. That's clearly not within our 2 or 3 pip range, and it looks like the market's just trying to find its feet. So as a result, we had another kind of weird signal here, and then a reversal, and that occurred to the downside, and you can see we created a new signal line, and then we were in this area here, and we had a drop off, a nice drop off. If you'd like to, you can also try the following. You can put your line next to the medallion and just get a little better view by dropping down to the 5-minute chart. And you can see in this particular case, we had some good signals. We had a nice signal right here. We were close to the signal line so that we didn't have much risk to the north. We were in a position where the market was consolidating and then dropped dramatically. And while this might not be 100 pips, it's down here into the 34 pip area, and so there's nothing wrong with that. So you might want to wait for a signal on the of a medallion on the 15-minute chart and then drop to the 5 to see about this signal here, and at least you know that you have a reversal on the higher time frame. So also I'd like to point out it's good that the trend line, the trend magic line here is below the signal line. This red indicates things are negative, but it's also down below. And so as you come back up into the trend magic, you'll notice a lot of times that the pullback that we're waiting for after the arrow will stall right at the trend magic line. That's also a great place to go. If it comes over here, for example, the same thing is true. Down towards the trend magic line, down and waiting here, and then taking off to the north. And on this kind of a thing, here was our typical pattern. A nice signal north. The trend magic is above the line. We're above the 55. We have some pullbacks going on, and you have to be patient, but this is only like 45 minutes or so in this area. And so if you were to wait until you got down into this trend magic area for a buy, there's another 24 pips to the north as you're headed into the 7 o'clock hour on our session times indicator here. This was the London Open, and you can see after this drop-off there was a significant reversal of the pound, and the pound tends to be very sensitive to the London Open. Okay, so those are a few more ideas for you, and we'll come back to wrap it up in just a sec. Okay, a couple more observations for you before you get deeply involved in this template. One important thing that I want you to notice is as follows. We had a reversal. I've moved to this particular time period. Here's a 7 a.m. hour. This was back on the 19th, which was Friday. And you can notice a couple of things. Here was the open of the New York Stock Exchange, and then 2 o'clock in the afternoon, basically East Coast time. So you can see on a Friday afternoon, not much is going on. I wouldn't recommend taking a signal like this on a Friday afternoon because the spreads have widened and everybody's gone home for the weekend. And so as a result of that, I just stay out at this point in the day. It's too late. Even if it meets your schedule, it doesn't meet the Forex trading schedule. So watch out for that. Now, one important thing that really is a benefit of using our signal lines, you can see that there, and I'll get rid once again of the trend magic just so to clean it up, not because it's not important, but because it shows a bad view. I wanted to show you that once again here in our 9:30 hour, we had on Fridays, we'd already had our move. The average day's range had been basically met. And so we moved into a consolidation phase here on the pound versus the US on that Friday. And notice that even though we went down this way, and even though we created a signal line higher, and even though we created another one here, anytime the moving averages are kind of trending in between these two lines, you know there's nothing to be done. It's just a consolidation period, so that's another way to avoid getting involved with these signals. And that was really a major reason that I created the signal line, because I noticed that in between here was a time when you simply wanted to not be bothering to trade. Now, once again, we moved over into this area. Once we saw we're not going to trade on late on a Friday afternoon, even though we had something happening here. It was 2 or 3 pips and hardly worth the trouble. Notice that once again we had our up move. We created the signal line at the top value of our crossover candle. Then we pulled back, as we often do, and we didn't get our confirmation until up in this area. And so just as a quick review, we'll go back to our indicator list, we'll go to session times, and we'll just see what happens if we change our signal from, let's say, 20, let's go back to 14. You can put in any number you'd like there. It doesn't have to be our 12, 24, 16. Notice that what we had here was a 14 pulls back into this area, so we still get a valid signal. We have a pullback. We could even go at this point. There's nothing wrong at all. I don't know if it'll help us, but let's see. We'll put our line here after this, and let's drop down to a 1-minute chart just for fun. Let's see where we are here with this. Here it is. Notice we've got a 1-minute signal. We had an up move, we had a pullback, and then we had a continuation higher. Now, you're not going to get the same number of pips potentially on a 1-minute chart without a change in direction as you would on a 15 or 30-minute chart. But if you're just scalping, or you're trying to see whether you can sit there for an hour and just make some money, this would be another way to do it. Now, from here back down to the signal line, it's only 5 pips, so there's really not a lot happening. And notice again, we had our reversal. We had our down candles, and then we had another candle or two that took out the previous lows. So there you go, back into the business. I wouldn't take it until we had this reversal, because you don't know, it may just drift all the way back down to the signal line. Oftentimes it does that. Okay, those are several tips on how to avoid false signals on our template Thailand. I hope it's a great refresher for you and an in-depth view. Remember that if you check out our description below this video. You can get these indicators for no charge. And please do subscribe if the material is helpful to your trading. Give us a like. Don't be stingy. And feel free to leave a comment or a question if there's any way we can follow up and help you make lots of money by crushing the currencies. Thanks for watching.